Good afternoon. We're going back to our headsets. I see some looks and eyes that are looking at me with what is she talking about and what is she doing? Great. Just to make sure that we all have the headsets before we could start. And good afternoon to every single one. I'm pretty sure, and I pray that you have had some coffee or something to pick you up, some little sugar for the afternoon. So kindly allow me to welcome you to a Smart Africa session. I would say that this is our second session talking about data protection. We're hosting a knowledge sharing this afternoon, hoping that we're going to have an engaging session with questions. I think we're also with the same cohort, that could call it that way, that we had in the morning. So in case we have questions and answers that we still want to pass across, our session today is going to tackle the data protection, privacy, and technologies and ccTLDs for governments and regulators. We are going to have three presentations or three experts presenting. We're going to have our first one, Aretha Made, our unit manager for data governance, cybersecurity, and smart women and girls in Smart Africa, who is going to present on data protection and privacy for a period of about 30 minutes. Then we're going to tackle the role of importance of IP, numbers in strengthening ccTLDs, data governance in Africa. And our last presentation, we're going to have it from Emmanuel Vitus on experiences sharing from the region economic communities and discussion and regional collaboration around the topic. Thank you so much. We're going to start with Aretha Made before we keep going. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I see most of us were in the earlier session that we had just before lunch. And today I'm going to switch a bit from what Krista had presented. I'm putting on different shoes. My DG was supposed to be with us today, together with my director, Thelma, but they've not been able to come. But Thelma will be joining us tomorrow. So I'm going to share a speech on behalf of DG Lasina Kone, building on what I shared earlier on during the last session. So I want to start by acknowledging the representation in the room. We have representatives from governments and regulatory authorities, representatives from the Network of African Data Protection Authorities. I believe in our international organizations and partners, the internet governance ecosystem, and representatives from regional economic communities. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session during the Global Internet Governance Forum, where we are discussing country code top-level domains and the intersection with data privacy. And we are going to be sharing experiences as well with implementation that's currently ongoing. So on behalf of Director General Lasina Kone of Smart Africa, it's truly an honor to be with you this afternoon. As we gather here in Riyadh, the internet governance ecosystem is currently facing numerous challenges of various natures, which threaten the coherence, strengthening and sustainability of our critical resources. The Internet Governance Forum, as we know, provides a unique platform for bringing together stakeholders from around the world to discuss and address the challenges and opportunities of digital public policy. While the IGF does not produce negotiated outcomes, its work helps inform and inspire policymakers, guiding the direction of digital policies for the years to come. We would like to extend our thanks to the UN Secretary General and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for hosting this IGF and supporting the continuation of this essential conversation. Dear participants, today's session is crucial as we face the growing challenges of governance for critical infrastructures in an increasingly connected world. In 2024, Over 5 billion people are connected to the internet, which further exposes user data and privacy. Data protection and privacy have become major priorities, with 80% of users expressing concern about the security of their personal information. It is therefore essential to ensure the security of sensitive data and the digital identities of countries, particularly through country code top-level domains. The governance of these infrastructures represents a key issue for cybersecurity, with 25% increase in cyber attacks in 2023 alone. In this session, we'll discuss strategies to improve digital governance and protect critical resources and digital identities. This aligns with Smart Africa's objective of strengthening digital policies and promoting collaboration among stakeholders for sustainable and secure digital development. And to our dear representatives from the government, in this session, we'll closely examine the role of ccTLDs, which are not only technical assets, but also crucial tools for promoting national sovereignty in cyberspace and supporting broader data protection and privacy frameworks. Our goal is to deepen the understanding of the intersection between ccTLD governance and data protection regulations. Specifically, we aim to highlight the challenges of modern data regulation and the balance between data-driven innovation and privacy protection. We aim to discuss challenges faced by regulations such as the EU GDPR and the US CCPA, as well as the role of cross-border ccTLD in global governance. We want to explore how ccTLD governance shapes national and regional digital policies. We also want to share experiences from various regions and discuss collaborative solutions to these challenges. We are pleased to have esteemed experts with us today, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their availability. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to hearing your perspectives and contributions as we work together to build a safer, more inclusive and trustworthy digital future for all. I would like to take a moment to thank each of you for your participation. Your engagement is crucial to the success of this session and to the broader mission of improving global digital governance. Let us work together to ensure that the internet and the critical identity resources we envision are secure, inclusive, and respect the privacy and rights of all. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Krista.
Thank you so much, Aretha. And indeed, I think we have quite a very background of knowledge. And thank you for also pointing out that our session today, we're meant to be talking about how to protect the critical resources. There's deepening our understanding. There's talking about the challenges and balance that we need to get to. Now, before moving forward, kindly allow me to welcome Kofi Fabrice Josu. He's the Senior Expert of Innovation of the West African Development Bank. Kofi has led multiple projects, including the implementation of the .Africa TLD to develop the strategy of 2 national ccTLDs. So welcome you, Kofi. You're welcome, and feel free to dive as there's a bit of some space at the back. Apologies, I think our setup today is not quite friendly to our discussions, but we hope that we can all learn. And also looking forward for the different questions, answers, and comments that we can have. Welcome, Kofi.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Initially, I wanted to... Can you hear me? Yeah, well. So initially, I wanted to deliver my message in French, but unfortunately, I found that the French audience is... l'audience francophone est très limitée, donc je vais le faire en anglais, si ça ne vous dérange pas. Si, bien sûr, j'ai l'autorisation de la communauté francophone. Vous m'autorisez ou pas? Ils sont ravis de faire en anglais, c'est bon? Ou en français? Anglais, c'est bien. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Krista, for the opportunity to speak. Related to the challenges ccTLDs are facing within the internet ecosystem. I think you all can confirm with me that nowadays, Africa is the heart of the world digital trends. critical infrastructures such as critical resources, in particular our country code top-level domain ccTLDs, namely .cn for Senegal, .za for South Africa, .ci for Cote d'Ivoire, .ng for Nigeria, may have played a key role in the digital sovereignty of African countries. However, behind those domain names, there's a critical technical component often remaining in the shadow: IP addresses, IP numbers. So they are the digital addresses that ensure the connectivity and security, even the resilience of a digital ecosystem. So together, what I want you to enjoy this afternoon is to explore with me how proper management of IP numbers can strengthen ccTLD governance in Africa. So let us examine what is at stake, challenges and opportunities of this technical and strategic convergence. And if you allow me, let me recognize in the audience Mr. Paulo, Dr. Paulo from Malawi, who have been running the MW for many, many years. I'm sure he will share with us his experience in ccTLD management. So, well, for the interest of time, I will try to narrow the ambit of my message into 4 key issues, which I do believe can be of importance of this audience. The first one, the issues of ccTLD governance in Africa, importance of IP numbers for ccTLD governance. The third one, specific challenges related to the African component, and indeed at the end, few recommendations in conclusion. So, why ccTLD's governance in Africa is not just about technical management. It's also about sovereignty, resilience, and security of a DNS, the domain name system. Let's imagine a country whose ccTLD data are hosted abroad. In the event of geopolitical tension, I'm sure those data become vulnerable. So without solid governance, malicious actor can actually hijack your critical information, critical domain, creating indeed serious economic and social impact. So in Africa, it's crucial that we secure ccTLDs, ensure their resilience against cyber threat, and turn them into tools for socio-economic development. IP numbers, they definitely are essential for achieving these objectives, offering traceability and control. Now, the importance of IP numbers for ccTLD governance. Why IP numbers are so crucial for ccTLD management? First of all, IP numbers ensure the performance of a DNS server that keep a national website accessible. So poor management of ccTLDs, or even poor management, let me say, for IP numbers, can actually lead to breakdown or security breaches. Secondly, IP numbers provide necessary transparency. They make it possible to track down malicious activities and reinforce user confidence. And finally, you all are aware about the adoption of IPv6, which is still very critical in the continent. So the adoption of IPv6 with expanded address space open up many opportunities for innovative services such as Internet of Things, smart cities, which are particularly relevant to economies to perform the knowledge society. Now let us look at the specific challenges to African continent, because despite of the opportunities I've just mentioned earlier, several challenges are still holding the continent back. First of all, many organizations are still unaware of the importance of IP numbers and ccTLDs, which are definitely recognized as a digital flag or even as digital territories. Because when you host a content under your country code top level domain, under your ccTLD online, it looks like your digital territory. So you definitely have to look at how to protect your information and then safeguard that digital space. Second one is the investment. Few investments are made to adopt the IPv6. And in addition, on the technical point of view, even the representation of African experts in international technical bodies, I think our representation are very limited. So I think at the end of the day, we must act as an African collectively to catch up and capitalize on these strategic resources. So in conclusion, few recommendations I would like to make for strengthening ccTLD governance via IP numbers. In other words, my point is to how do we turn those challenges into opportunities, hence a call for action. First one is capacity building at national level. How can we offer a specialized training to master IP number management and security of a DNS? Second one, massive IPv6 adoption. Our government, even our various stakeholders at the national level, must encourage operators to migrate to these new standards. Third, promote regional collaboration and use those platforms such as Smart Africa, meetings, platforms. Use them as a catalyst to promote the regional collaboration at a technical level. And indeed, last but not least, raise stakeholders' awareness. Because our ccTLDs and then to the extent our IP numbers must be recognized as a strategic tool for development. So I think with this measure, we can definitely take a good journey, take control of our digital sovereignty, and fully exploit the potential of our digital ecosystem. So I think that's what I can share with you. I'm ready for questions, but before, if you allow me, Dr. Paulos, do you want to share what you have been doing with MW in Malawi for the benefit for the interest of the audience? I thank you very much. Sorry for it was not expected.
I think indeed it would be honored to hear from you, Dr. Paulo. If we could welcome you at the front, and then we're going to have the Q&A. You're welcome to come at the front for a quick knowledge sharing. It could be an addition to what he shared or your personal perspective or project that you have worked on before we could welcome Emmanuel. Absolutely, yes, you can. I think there should be as well a second mic on that side. Yes. All right. And just to also mention, I think would also want to have this as an interactive session. If you do have comments, questions, challenges that would want to share with the room, you're welcome. But please go ahead, Dr. Paulo.
Thank you. Thank you, Kofi, for the introduction. Yes, I'm Dr. Paulo Sirenda. I come from Malawi. Malawi's country code top level domain is .mw. And we have been running it for quite some time, since 2002. I think that there are a number of things that we can share on technologies, on protection, on privacy. We've also been associated with the Africa Top Level Domain Organization, which coordinates ccTLDs in Africa. And so far, the journey has been good for ccTLDs. The general picture in Africa is that ccTLDs are still very small from country to country, and they struggle with sustainability. There is indeed need, as Kofi has mentioned, for development, for capacity development, for awareness. Awareness, especially on things like data protection, awareness in terms of privacy. We don't have adequate privacy rules within the continent. So far, we are using privacy things from other continents, and we don't have enough technological developments for our ccTLDs. Our registries still depend on software and platforms from outside the continent. So we have a lot of work to do in these areas. I think I should stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for raising. Apologies, we're still giving you the mic because you're to take the questions and in the room. But thank you for raising the question about the capacity building, because I think that's also something that, to speak maybe on the behalf of Smart Africa, that has been worked on. There's a project currently going on called the Smart Africa Digital Academy for the next 5 years to capacitate, raise awareness on these different multiple subjects. I know we're also talking about the data protection, but I also see some cybersecurity experts in the room. I'll not mention names just to pinpoint, but we also hope to hear from them. But before we move forward, kindly allow me to also open the floor to the room as Kofi has, Fabrice has presented. If we do have any questions, please, you're much welcome to share the questions before we move forward.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm Yao Sosu from Benin. I'm the current national coordinator of the Youth IGF in Benin. I'm speaking in that capacity. I just want to make a comment regarding the ccTLD adoption on the African continent, and putting into perspective the several thoughts Africa.com or any. Yeah, the comment I want to make regarding the ccTLD adoption in Africa is mainly about, yes, there's a lack of awareness about importance of the need to have this digital space occupied by small, medium enterprises in the continent. But I think there's also a component that we are missing, the strategy needed to be put in place so that adoption becomes easy, falls on the other hand on the legislator somehow, like how we put in place strategies so that, for example, if a small like a small enterprise or medium-sized company is created, is there an automatic mechanism that assign directly specific domain name to that company either in the country or in the region? And also another comment would be the regulator of those ccTLDs. I think most of them, if they are not non-profit organization running those ccTLDs, we will have problem in terms of making those ccTLDs affordable for commoners, for example. Like if there are companies running, they will look for profit, but it is, for example, universities or non-profit organization, they might get support from the government, but then securing the infrastructure to make sure that the domains are resilient and trustworthy and also sustainable, but not focusing on the monetary aspect of it, but making it more affordable and accessible. But when it is only run by business, private companies, then affordability and sometimes interoperability becomes issue. So thank you very much.
For coming back on that awareness, and then there's accessibility. Allow me to have Dr. John, our very
future Dr. John. My question is, perhaps Dr. Paulos Miranda would answer it. The data protection regimes tend to promote not sharing personal details. While I know for the internet world, specifically for top level domains and the IP kind of regime, we always have a contact person such that the technical team can quickly reach them in case the systems are misbehaving. So I'm wondering, how do you in practice balance those two things? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think that in Africa, this is a chicken and egg situation. Most of our community participants, they are not aware of the technology. So applying privacy, applying data protection on them leads to problems with operation of some of the ccTLDs, especially when you talk about the who is. The who is where you can find out who has registered which address, IP address, or even a domain name. So if you enforce a lot of privacy, a lot of protection, what happens is that the technology becomes difficult to operate because you need to know who has registered what. So hiding a lot of information still does not work very well in Africa because of the there is not enough awareness, there is not enough penetration of the identifiers, IP addresses, and domain names. And there is not enough awareness of the technicalities on how to trace some of the things. So in our case in Malawi, we try to balance these. I think one of the things that has really come out in the past few years is the European GDPR, where you are required to hide telephone numbers, addresses, and so forth. In Malawi, we didn't do this because it was becoming difficult to balance between the awareness of the community and the privacy of the data. So there is a very critical balance that needs to be managed when you're doing governance for these things. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Kofi, does that answer to what you had raised?
In fact, just a
Let's say.
quick comment to add. Is it okay? Yeah. So just a quick comment to what just have been said. In fact, Dr. Paulo said earlier that most ccTLDs are still small, and there's a lot of work again because the journey is still long. That's exactly why back in 2011, before the inception of the first new GTLD program, because allow me to tell you that since that new GTLD program, the namespace have been densely than ever. Then nowadays, you can actually point out exactly the content and link your content with a domain name. That's exactly why in terms of African integration, because the world look at Africa as one. That's why head of state endorsed the implementation of .Africa top-level domain, working through a digital integration allowing African content to be sold at the world stage. And then indeed, how our national ccTLDs can find a way within the adoption of .Africa, because nowadays you see many organizations having the domain name ending by .Africa, pointing out their content to Africa. Then what was the plan initially was to build up a regional strategy where because we're thinking about socioeconomic development where the benefit of a Data Africa operation should be channeled to a foundation. And that foundation will now support the ccTLDs operation through AFTLD, like Dr. Paulo said. But the foundation is still ongoing. The creation of a foundation is still ongoing. There's a lot of work to be done. But what we need to understand when I said raise awareness is to think about how do we localize our content. Let us not just, when we want to register under a domain name, to think about the .com, which have been one of the key domain names with the rise of a boom of internet. Because many people nowadays always link .com to internet. But then we need, that's where the awareness comes in, to raise, to educate our community, specifically on the data protection issue. Because when you look at somebody registering a domain name, most of the data are in the IANA database. IANA is not an African database. Let us now, as a data protection agency or operator, think about how do we look at an African who is. Is it possible? Many unknown questions. Many unknown questions, because you want to register, you go to a registrar, he sells you a domain name. Most of all your information are in the WHOIS database. Then, as a national data protection operator or agency, how do you challenge the WHOIS? You cannot. So there are so many questions at a stake, and we need together to find a platform where we can bring all our ccTLDs together, Data Africa operation together, and then look at how we can address the data protection mechanism through the ccTLD management.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing in the perspective of looking at this at a regional level. I think to also bring this conversation into perspective, we're going to have our next presentation, and then before we could all contribute to the conversation discussion today, we're going to be joined by Agbe Nosi Elolo Emmanuel. He's actually the Internet Governance and Digital Policy Specialist and Coordinator of the West African IGF ECOWAS. So it would be great to now hear at a REC or at a regional economic community how this is managed and also their perspective on this. You're welcome, Emmanuel. And we hope that we're also going to still have Kofi in the room when we have the last final questions. You're welcome, Emmanuel.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Ok. Olá, tudo bem? Vamos continuar em português? Because I can see common faces of people who speak Portuguese in the room. So I was thinking inclusion, maybe I should speak Portuguese. Non, c'était une blague. So look at, I will not go into the technical aspects of things, because I think Yauvi has actually spoken a lot about the ccTLDs, even mentioned the AFTLD. I will speak more from the IGF perspective. At the regional level, I mean, how are we using this instrument at the continental level, and also give a regional case study at the ECOWAS level, how the IGF has been helping shaping some of this policy, some of this experience sharing, bringing together the stakeholders in thinking forward at the regional level. So, Okay, so we'll look at how these regional IGFs around the continent are helping, fostering that dialogue in addressing these issues, and also look at the role of the regional collaboration achieving, this harmonized governance, and also understand what will happen in 2025, because that is very critical. We are sitting here today discussing all this, but maybe this is our last, or maybe Norway may be the last meeting that we actually gather as a multi-stakeholders to have this kind of conversation. So we'll look at it, and if it happens, what can we do as a region, or what can we do as a continent? So first of all, I always like going back to the basics, because the audiences are not the same. Some of us are in the industry, we are doing our career in the industry. It's very easy to understand when they talk about internet governance. But I think if I take my Francophone friends who are attending the IGF for the first time, some of them representing their governments, when they say governance, they think it's a government affair. So it's important to always go back to the basics, so that people understand that when we talk about governance, is to have that space where all the stakeholders can come together, either from the academia, the private sector, or the government, to have a conversation, both at the national level and the regional level, to network and also discuss the common future. So this is how it was looking like in Africa, few years ago. So as you can look at it, before the African Council of Ministers adopts the charter for the African IGF, we were at that stage when we talk about internet governance. It was ministers gathering together, it was government gathering together, having a conversation. And from that, today we actually get to this, where we have the academia, the private sector, the international organization, the regional communities, and also the civil society. So that has started, in Africa since 2011. We are able to consistently hold those conversations at the continental level. And I see Henriette coming to the room. I think she was part of the people who were sitting in that room in those days, discussing how do we actually move from this to this. So after moving to this, what happened? So we were able to put in place what we call the regional IGFs. So we have West Africa IGF. I can see Mary in the room. Yes, she's at the back there. They were there from day one, setting up that regional, platform. We have the East Africa Internet Governance Forum. I can see few people as well in the room. Then we move to the Central Africa. I think I can see their coordinator also sitting in the room. The North Africa is in the room as well. And in recent years, through the PRIDA project, I think we're able to set up a number of national schools of internet governance. Aside the African School of Internet Governance that has existed for years, we are able now to put in place a lot of national schools where we are able to build capacity. I think in the conversation we're having right now with Fabrice, he mentioned that, saying that we have to build capacity. Where do we build capacity? Because at the end of the day, they'll tell you we are having a workshop for data protection agencies. Where does the academic sit? Where does the private sector sit? Where does the CSO sit? So it has become very important, training people through those schools where we discuss these critical issues. Because some of them are talking about strategy. How are we able to promote our ccTLDs? I think those have been topics in those schools where everybody from their perspective and their stakeholder group bring together their knowledge, their ideas together. So is that enough? Is that enough? Having the meetings was not enough, because in some of the meetings we are even able to do case studies, especially from the African School of Internet Governance, where, for example, you have specific topics. I think this year it was data governance. Previous years, when I was at the school, I think 2016, it was internet shutdowns. I think every year we come up with challenges like that when we try to put together what we call a policy document to advise the head of state to actually adopt those strategies, because those strategies usually come from a multi-stakeholder perspective. And talking about it, so as I said, now that we have the platform, now that we are discussing the challenges, more we are moving, more we are facing the challenges, and it becomes easy for us to tackle them. If I take the African IGF, for example, a few years ago, the parliamentarians were not in the room. But we will notice that after we spoke, especially civil society, after we went to play, quote in quotes, the people taking the decision are the policy makers. The people taking the decision are the MPs. So we are able, for example, at the West African level this year to train 35 parliamentarians in a focused track where they are able to meet the private sector, where they are able to meet ICANN, when they are able to meet Afrinic, to discuss issues pertaining the technical management of our ccTLDs, in the digital cooperation, issues pertaining the data protection, etc. So those MPs are well equipped when they go back to their countries, when they go back to their chambers. Easy for us, for them to be our champions when those bills come out. And when they come and from their colleague, that peer learning, it helped them as well start some of those processes in their various countries. So from the ECOWAS perspective, I will move quickly to go to the mind map. So this is what has been happening, for a few years at the ECOWAS level. And today it became more interesting because we got an experience, especially at the ECOWAS level. Why? Because it's one of the two IGF that sit with the regional economic organization, which is the ECOWAS. They have the Secretariat of it, and we are able to actually, manage bringing all those stakeholders together, because ECOWAS always managed to bring the 15, states, member states, to the IGF. He invited all the 15 governments, sponsor them to come to have that kind of conversation. One of the strengths has been money, because money is always the issue when we are talking. So we are today able to set up a structure where we have an organization that is not part of the Secretariat handling our funding, meaning nobody will run with the money that we raise, and we have a more transparency and accountability into the process. And one of our strengths has also been having the stakeholder inclusiveness. Nobody has been excluded in West Africa IGF so far. And now we have, as I said, the MP network. We have the school. Since 2018, we are able to successfully organize the school to have about 1,200 alumni, which is huge. And among those alumni, you have the MP, you have members from the community that are able to start processes in their countries, that are able to advise their government, that are able to advise other stakeholder groups within their countries. We also find out that there's a lot of opportunity, because after COVID, we notice a lot of governments are having challenges when it comes to data protection, when it comes to other issues that the COVID has taught us as a challenge. So that has become a topic of challenge for our conversation that we have, during the regional IGFs. And at the same time, it helps us advise the regional community, which is the ECOWAS. If you take their cybersecurity strategy, for example, it came out from the IGF. Majority of the policies that they put in place as economic community come from the West African Internet Governance Forum. This year, we discussed, for example, disruptive technologies. And from the school perspective, we are able to put in place what we call a blueprint document to ECOWAS from the school. So we are not just staying into the theory, but we are able to put up a concrete actions to the regional economic community. And the good part of it is all those recommendations are usually shared when the Council of Ministers meets. And we share the recommendations with all the governments in all 3 languages that we speak in West Africa, in English, French, and Portuguese, so that we have concrete action line for the region and concrete action line at the national level. And also, well, as every initiative, we do have our weaknesses, which is the sponsors. Our sponsors varies from year to year. It's not sustainable because sometimes the private sector come in, they will bring you the money. Next year, they are not around. The next year, we go to another organization. So it's not really sustainable. But one of the good things is ECOWAS is at least managing every year to fund their member states. And also, what we have also noticed is we are able to train. Training is good. Putting strategies in place are good. But one of the weaknesses is we are not able today, up to date, to follow the successes. We cannot trace it, which is a challenge, and I think a lot of IGFs are facing that same challenge about tracing the successes that come out from those various IGFs. And also the people that we train, we don't have sustainability plans like following them up, especially the MPs when they go back to their country. Though now we are able to set up a network, which I think I advise every region to have a network of parliamentarians, and those parliamentarians are able to have that conversation outside the IGF. They are able to share their challenges and strategies outside the regional IGF. So that has been something that is also interesting from the West African perspective. At the African perspective, it has been successful, especially this year, where after the AfriSIC, we have a lot of them being trained during the AfriSIC, and a lot of them being part of the network. Apologies. So, as I said, those issues, a lot of people always ask a question: what is the concrete result of IGF? And I think, as I mentioned it earlier, that is the main challenge all the regional IGFs, including the Africa IGF, have to have a close look at. We have to start tracing what have we raised as recommendation, what have we got as a result. Because we do have some success stories, we do have some concrete results. Like, for example, the free roaming in West Africa, the conversation started during the regional IGF. It went up to Smart Africa, came back to implementation, and now in the region, a lot of countries can enjoy a regional free roaming. Those are some few examples that we have to be able to trace so that the stakeholders, especially the policymakers, understand that those meetings are very important for us if we want to move forward. So this will be the map I want you to keep in mind, because we are having the process for a couple of years, as I said. 2011 for the Africa IGF, West Africa IGF, we have been 17 editions. So it's very important for us to understand that next year, September, a lot of things may change. So if we want to actually still be relevant and still be as a community, and not going back to what I shared earlier, like a single model where governments or agencies come together and discuss, and we want to have this multi-stakeholder approach in place, is very important for us to actually give an input to these processes. At the West Africa level, we have given input to the GDC, for example. We have given our input to the WISIS Plus. So it's very important for us for other regions, either East Africa, Central Africa, North Africa, to continue, putting our input into these processes, so that in September, during the UN General Assembly, they should tell us that, well, we have renewed the mandate of the IGF, so that at the regional level, we can still continue those conversations. at the continental level, we can still continue this kind of conversation. So it's very important that all these processes going on right now, we should be able to mobilize our government, we should be able to mobilize our regional economic communities, mobilize our IGF to do those input to those processes. So what if it changed? Because yes, it may change, while next year they will not renew the mandate. So it's very important for us to keep a close look at the initiative that we have actually built together. And I think Smart Africa has been one of them. Because if the IGF does not exist anymore, we still need a platform. We still need to come together under one umbrella at a multi-stakeholder process to continue this conversation. So it's very important for us to look at what we have. Because I know for the civil society people sitting in the room, for the private sector people sitting in the room, our objective is that we still want to sit at the same table with the government. It will be a pleasure for the regional economic communities to still have not just their member state governments, but have all the stakeholders into the table. So it's very important for us, even if the IGF does not continue next year, we should be able to actually support the initiative that exists. That's why I mentioned Smart Africa. I think there are 40 states now. We should be able to actually come together under one umbrella and as a continent to continue our multi-stakeholder conversations, either the IGF continue or not. And I think these are some of the few recommendations from the access point that they have been working on, either from technical point of view, either from framework point of view or policy point of view. It's very important that we have a close look, into this, so that it's not just government or regional, economic communities having a conversation. We should be able to continue the multi-stakeholder journey together under that umbrella. Okay, they have decided to to not let me finish. So yes, I think at the end of the day, what we want is to have that multi-stakeholder conversation going. Discussing, I think somebody raised a question right now to say, why not obliging the small enterprise having a ccTLD when they are registering? I think countries have tried. If you take the case of Togo, for example, before you register a business, you must have a domain name. But there was not a process, for example, obliging you to activate that domain name. So when we gather like this, it's very easy, for example, to share those experiences. So when others are going to adopt such strategy, they know that other people have failed from there. And those experience sharing can not only be shared among agencies, it have to be shared with the private sector in the room, with the civil society organizations in the room. That's why I said again, either the IGF continue or not, we should be able to maintain that multi-stakeholder action. So I think I will stop there. And in my conclusion, I think the same thing that we wanted since 1998 is the same thing that we still want today. I think those days our government were not so much aware, the private sector as well, but today we are much more aware. The same thing we wanted during the WSIS process, which African continent has been very active in various meetings that led to that until the Tunis agenda. I think the same thing that we are still discussing today, and it will be very important to maintain that, whether the IGF continue or discontinue. I don't know whether you have questions, but it will be good to have questions from you, either from the African perspective or from the regional economic perspective. I should be able to help you with some of the answers. I think there's another mic. We can pass it through.
Before you probably leave, I think for maybe just a point of correction for Smart Africa, I think you're probably going to go back to those questions. I think you have called for action, and I think we have multiple people in the room. We have colleagues from the GFCE, which I think this could be a point, a moving forward or challenge to each one of us, not just Smart Africa. As you have said, I think thank you for raising this multi-stakeholder alliance. And I don't think Smart Africa would probably achieve this without all of us understanding the need why we're here and how we could work together. And I think there's also a need, there's someone who has mentioned about the developmental partners that we also have to collaborate with. So I think I don't know if we can go back to that slide just to call for action or just a challenge on do we think we can achieve this, because not one organization can take this on our heads to achieve that. Allow me to welcome Dr. Martin from GFCE for a question. You're welcome.
First of all, you can hear me? I hope so. First of all, thank you so much for this particular session, and gratitude to Smart Africa and others who have just presented before me. I have one question for the speaker, whom we've been talking to, and also a few other areas that I just wanted us to touch on the earlier presentation that was given by Kofi. There is no doubt that institutions that you mentioned, such as parliamentarians, committees that exist in parliament, require knowledge so that they can be able to intervene at the policy level, legislative level, as we well know it. But I think one issue that we need to be cognizant of is sometimes the lack of institutional memory, where the individuals that participate in these very crucial intervention levels, whether at regional or at national level, do leave the office. Parliamentarians' lifespan, and I know there are many of them here maybe, will agree with me that we're in parliament for 4 years, 5 years, sometimes 2 terms, 1 term. But the key really is to instill institutional memory within the parliamentary structure. So that is point number one. Maybe West Africa, you can tell us how you're doing that. But the key area that I wanted also to intervene is the understanding that when we talk about ccTLD, with data governance, there is a very clear intersection. It is the access, control, and management of data. Having understood that, it is also important that we now are more transparent in terms of what does it mean to emphasize on ccTLD. And I think Kofi did a good job to give us the advantages of that. But we also know that there are some specific jurisdictions that do restrict the way data is controlled. And some of these could be punitive to any commercial enterprise of those particular entities. There is also the issue around how do we make sure that when things go wrong, though the protection of the data is guaranteed, how does someone else misuse that data so that it is not now advantageous to the citizens? And then lastly, there is the issue around the practicalities and the best practice. I think my recommendation here would be that we have to be transparent with the policies that involve the issue of ccTLDs, especially when it comes to issues like defining storage, access, infrastructure. Let's be very clear of the challenges that are involved so that the private sector, the government sectors are aware of it. Then secondly, there is the issue about awareness, and I don't want to labor on that one. I think it's clear IGF Africa is doing a good job, and of course, making people aware is one thing, but sustaining that awareness to practicalities is another. And then thirdly is the issue of periodically we need to review the ccTLD governance framework. Because what that means is that we should cope with specific emerging challenges like AI and other issues. So that's the intervention that I thought we should make sure we address. But the key is really institutional memory. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just respond to one question, and I think Kofi can take the other one. So the first one was the institutional memory that he mentioned, and I think he's right, because this IGF, a lot of MPs are not here because there are no more MPs. So how do we actually build that institutional memory? I think that's why we're having networks. From West African level, for example, we have the network, and I think the network still stands when people leave, because the network become an institution. and the network know where they started from, they are, and where they want to get to. So that is very important, and that's why I welcome projects like, for example, the SADA project in terms of capacity building, because this year that's what we actually wanted to do, saying that we just not, because the schools we have been having them, we want to have a particular track where those people can be able to learn the things that can be actionable when they go back to their country, or even when they go back to the regional, how do you call it, parliament. Because our regional parliament, for example, is very active as well. And those people set up regional policies. I spoke about the free roaming, for example. It's very simple to say it, but if you live in a region like West Africa, you understand how, for example, that policy has really helped the region. If you talk about the cybersecurity aspect, for example, in West Africa, those MPs, those policymakers are able today to actually fit into the ECOWAS cybersecurity strategy, which is something that can be very sustainable, either those MPs leave or not. So I think in terms of sustainability, it's very important that we institutionalize all those networks so that when the people leave, at least the spirit and the how do you call it, the ideas behind those networks stay, so that we continue even without the IGF. So he raised another question concerning the ccTLDs, and I think that one I will leave it to the technical person, which is Kofi, to answer that around the review of ccTLD charters and mechanisms.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think there's a lot of confusion in Africa related to ccTLD management. Many of the ccTLD registries think that running a ccTLD is only selling a domain name. But it's more than that. It's a management, bringing together intellectual property, management of a registry, some reserve names. So many issues, many components need to be considered to run the ccTLD. But again, the various stakeholders need to understand their key role. That way, the multi-stakeholders approach, as promoted by the Internet Governance Framework, need to be more strengthened. Because when you look at some countries, government will say, we have a one to run the ccTLD through the regulator. But the regulator is not a manager. A regulator should regulate to promote a fair competition, even assist the government to put in place an enabling environment allowing the ccTLD registry to promote the socio-economic growth of the country. When you look at some countries, like you said, well, in Togo, for example, they said, as soon as you register at the Chamber of Commerce, your company, you should definitely have a ccTLD domain name ending by TG. But then, at the end of the day, the registry will count that, okay, well, I have maybe these numbers of registry, but are they operating? How many websites are registered under that domain name? So the thing is, again, awareness. The need to let people understand the value of a domain name. And the registry itself should promote exactly the socio-economic growth of the country, because it's a business. An example, when we were implementing .Africa, we went to various African countries, and then we found that when you took a country like Senegal, there's a rally called Paris-Dakar. But the website under Paris-Dakar is not even registered under .sn. So that name have been registered at WIPO as a reserve name by another French company, while the name itself is a Senegalese name. So, like I said, there's a lot of components within a ccTLD management. Reserve names, intellectual property, data protection, and at the end of the day, how do we make money? Because Dr. Paulos mentioned it earlier. The infrastructure itself doesn't cost so much. But then how do you promote the ccTLD? How do you manage the ccTLD so that a citizen in the country should know that, okay, as long as he wants to register under a domain name, he will definitely choose your domain name. And at the end of the day, there's a pricing matter. Most important thing for a ccTLD manager is to understand the need of a value proposition. Why do you need to register under this domain name rather than the other one? It's not because this one is cheaper than the other. What the value of your domain name? So I think I provide the minimum answer of.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think there's one aspect that we actually miss, all of us, is the issue of trust, which is very important. The issue of trust, especially in certain countries on the continent, is that people's fear is that their data being localized with the government, especially people coming from civil society organizations. I think they trust more putting their data with a company like Verizon with .com than putting it with their own government. So we have to raise awareness, not just for the government as well, but for the civil society, to understand that it's not giving your data to government. Because that has been a concern. When we speak during those multi-stakeholder conversations, people will tell you that I don't trust my government, I don't want them to keep any of my data. So it's very important that we raise awareness so people understand the basics, how it works, the mechanism, who have access to it, which law governs it, and those kind of things. So people have at least the basics of it, so that it brings a certain trust to the community before they can put, their data, to that. I always tell people, if government wants your data the day you were born, your date of, your birth certificate, everything is government that give it to you, technically. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that because we have to build trust. In certain countries, the trust already exists. People don't struggle into that. But in other countries, the work needs to be done so that the population understand that you can still keep your data with your ccTLD and be safe. So it's very important that the awareness, we shouldn't just look at the policymakers level, we should look at even the users level and the civil society organization, the private sector. We have to look at that as well. I don't know if there's other questions from the floor or contribution. I saw Wisdom. So Wisdom has been one of the oldest in the ecosystem, especially from the African level. They have been there for years. So he may have his experience to share with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Wisdom, and then I'm from Ghana. I'm currently the non-commercial users constituency chair for ICANN. I'm just going to talk about the GTLDs. It's not as if we don't know what the problems are. We know the problems, but then addressing those problems is what we need to tackle. The first problem that I think we should be looking at and then helping address, which Dr. Martin mentioned, is awareness and accessibility. That is number one. We need to look at that. And also high domain registration and renewal cost makes adoption less attractive to many people in our part of the world. And trust and then security concerns, you mentioned it. And then lack of infrastructure. Our part of the world too, we need to begin to share infrastructure. If you come to the Western Africa, we can have one common infrastructure that serves the whole of West Africa. Same with East Africa. That way, we'll minimize that cost, and then we'll be able to move forward. And then the other important one that we also need to look out for is social media. We all know that most of these organizations that we have are all now doing business on using social media, Facebook and all of that, to the extent that Facebook even pays some of them. So some of these people, when they are benefit from there, they will not see the importance of what getting a TLD and all of that. So those are some of the issues that we need to be looking out for. And then the other aspect is the content. When you come to our part of the world, we have over almost, I would say, over 2,000 local languages, which is making it also difficult. We also need to look at that and see how we can address it. And then competition, as well as our cultural relevance. All of these things also play critical role that we need to look at this and then begin to see how we can help the continent, especially the cost aspect. Because if I want to get a domain in my country that is higher, that I know that I can easily get .com or .org at a lesser price, I'll go and get it and then still do what I want to do. And so these are the few concerns I want to.
I wanted to also ask a quick question. I think you've raised about the awareness and capacity building, and we spoke so highly, I mean, not so highly, but mostly on the parliamentarian. And I'm wondering if that awareness just at that level would surface to make this conversation go forward. And thankful for Dr. Martin, who also has raised these people go out of office. Thank you for the network, but I think when we mention capacity building, we only have to limit it to that level. Are we talking about capacity building to all sectors as well? Because I feel like when we, as you mentioned, when we talk about this multi-stakeholder alliance, but also going forward, it's something that needs to be sustainable. And I doubt that just at the level of the decision making, at that it would not dilute to all the sectors the where it needs to go forward. But.
Okay, I think what we need the most is champions. And in the IGF ecosystem, the word champion, mark it because it's very important. In the early days, I got into the ecosystem as a champion. As a champion on a German government fellowship. Saying that, okay, let's go to the Net Mundial. I don't know what is Net Mundial, 2014. They took me there. I couldn't even speak English because my native language is French. But they want me to become a champion. So when they want you to become a champion, they do whatever it takes to make you a champion. And I think that's what we are trying to do with the parliamentarians today. Because all those bills, as I said, all those good ideas that we are actually sharing here, they have the last word when you get to them in the parliament. The only thing that you need in that parliament is to have a champion. I think I went off. Oh, okay. So the only thing that you need in that room is to have a champion that can actually carry the idea. So when we are building capacity for them, we go back to the basics. To the basics, not to teach them how a ccTLD operates. No, that is not their business. They are there for 4 years or 5 years. What we teach them is to understand how the internet governance that we want works. Meaning, you have to listen to everybody. Not because government has presented one bill that is not a multi-stakeholder bill, then you go ahead and vote it. If you have a champion, the champion will take the bill to the community and ask the community input and bring it back. So in terms of sustainability, as I said, it has been a challenge. But once you have a champion, either he's in the parliament or he leaves the parliament, he's still a champion. Because the day I finished my fellowship, I thought I'm no more a champion, but I end up supporting the African Union, setting up over 19 national school of internet governance. I end up coordinating the regional IGF. I end up starting an IGF process in my country, and I end up supporting the Secretariat of the African IGF. It's to tell you that sometimes you are even running away from it, but as a champion, people will still come back to you. Same applies to the MPs. So we are building champions, not technicians, no. The capacity building that we want is to build them as a champion, as spokesperson for the community, as a spokesperson for the IGF. That is the kind of championship that we want to actually invest in. I saw one hand behind you.
I'm sorry, I'm tempted to respond because I have the right to respond. I actually agree with you that champions are important. I think some of us have scars to show that we are champions. But let me be very frank. The elephant in the room is the political will. The political will of member states is the actual elephant in the room. So whatever solution we have or prescription, that's the target. Let me give you an example. Parliamentarians have said that they've been accused of not being able to legislate what has been agreed continentally. For example, the Malabo Convention, we've always said, why is it not being ratified? But parliamentarians have said that there's a different dynamics when it comes to parliament. You have to be whipped to vote for certain legislation. So depending on what the political climate is within the parliament, some of these things can't be passed. There are some parliaments that people have different incentive. Every sitting, you get an allowance. So the more you postpone the sitting, the more allowance you get. So the dynamics are very different. But I think for me, if you want us to really, really address this issue, let's look at the elephant in the room, and that's the political will. There are different prescriptions for political will, but everything does matter. Champions are good, but if you're cut out from your own jurisdiction, there's very little that you can do. You know it, I know it. So the point is that let's look at the big elephant in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very, very good recommendation. And I think the political will everywhere in Africa, it has been a big challenge. And I encourage, especially the national IGFs, to make sure the government is on that table. Because that is a mistake we do as well. We say all the stakeholders are around because the regulator is sitting in the room. But the regulator doesn't take the decision for the government sometimes. So it's very important that we look at it from our national perspective, and at the regional perspective, we let the economic communities handle the member states and the regional parliaments.
And I think we have about 10 more minutes just to see if we haven't strangled anyone with a word. And if we haven't, I think we can wrap it up here, unless Kofi, Aretha, or Emmanuel, you have something to add to this. And we can take up this conversation at a later time. I think we've mentioned about this capacity building. We have a lot of trainers in the room. And I think this is also, thank you for the call for action. And I think, as you've mentioned, there is awareness that is needed, not just at the high level, but also we need to look at the networks and how to champion this further. So thank you to everyone. We're going to wrap it up here, and we look forward to seeing everyone, and hopefully we can also exchange more over a cup of coffee, dinner, or anything else. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's highly appreciated.
Where's the dinner, please?
I think we'll have to see where to have a good glass of wine. Yeah. Thank you.